Captain Jake Morrison stared at the damaged alien ship floating in the void near Proxima Centauri. The vessel was unlike anything he had seen before, with smooth curves and a strange blue glow that pulsed like a heartbeat. His exploration ship. New Horizon had been mapping the outer system when they detected the distress signal. Jake had served in the Earth Space Navy for 15 years, but this was his first encounter with something truly alien. "Captain, we're picking up life signs," reported Lieutenant Amy Collins from her station. "3 beings, but their biology is completely different from ours. They're alive, but barely." Jake made the decision that would change human history forever. "Prepare the rescue shuttle. We're bringing them aboard." The aliens were tall and thin with silver skin that seemed shimmer in the light. Their leader, who would later identify himself as Commander Veleneth of the Galactic Federation, was unconscious but breathing. Dr. Peter Williams worked frantically to stabilize the strange beings, while Jake's crew secured the alien vessel. When Commander Veleneth finally woke up 3 days later, his first words were translated by their universal communication device. "You saved us from the pirates. We did not expect such kindness from a primitive species." Jake felt a sting of irritation at the word primitive, but he remained diplomatic. "We're humans from Earth. We help anyone in need." Veleneth seemed surprised by this concept. "Your species has achieved faster than light travel, yet you risk yourselves for strangers. This is most unusual behavior." The alien commander explained that he represented the Galactic Federation, a massive alliance of 47 different species that had maintained peace for over 3,000 years. The Federation controlled most of the galaxy's civilized worlds and had never encountered humans before. "Your technology is adequate," Veleneth observed while examining the New Horizon systems. "But your methods are crude. You still use kinetic weapons and chemical propulsion systems. Most species abandon such primitive tools after achieving spaceflight." Jake bristled at the continued insults, but kept his temper in check. "Our weapons work just fine. We've been using them to protect our colonies from pirate attacks." "Pirates?" Veleneth looked confused. "The Outer Rim has always been plagued by raiders. Civilized species simply avoid those regions. Only the desperate or foolish try to establish colonies there." "We don't abandon our people," Jake replied firmly. "If someone attacks our colonies, we fight back." The aliens seemed to find this concept amusing. Fighting pirates is inefficient. It is better to simply relocate to safer territories. The Federation has learned that warfare only brings suffering. Over the following weeks, as the New Horizon escorted the repaired alien vessel back to Federation space, Jake learned more about galactic civilization. The Federation was ruled by a council of the most advanced species, those who had evolved beyond the need for violence and competition. They viewed newer species as children who needed guidance to reach true civilization. When they finally reached the Federation capital on Nexus Prime, Jake was amazed by the massive space station that housed billions of beings from dozens of different worlds. The architecture was beautiful but sterile, with smooth surfaces and gentle curves that seemed designed to avoid any hint of aggression. Ambassador Zefkar of the Volani species greeted the human delegation with polite condescension. "Welcome to the Federation, young humans. We are pleased to meet another species taking their first steps toward enlightenment." Dr. Lisa Parker, Earth's lead xenobiologist, had joined the diplomatic mission and was fascinated by the diversity of alien life. She observed creatures that looked like walking crystals, beings made of pure energy, and others that defied easy description. But she also noticed something troubling in how they interacted. "They have a rigid hierarchy," she whispered to Jake during a break in negotiations. "Every species has a specific rank based on how long they've been in the Federation and how evolved they're considered to be. It's not really a quality. The Federation's military advisor, General Crix of the Thraxian Empire, was particularly dismissive of human capabilities. The Thraxians were one of the few Federation species that still maintained a warrior culture, though they had supposedly evolved beyond actual warfare. "Your weapons are laughably primitive," Crix told Commander Alex Turner, who had been brought along as Earth's military representative. "Kinetic projectiles and explosive devices are the tools of savages. Our energy weapons can vaporize entire ships with precision strikes." Turner examined the advanced Federation weaponry with interest, but wasn't impressed. "Fancy gadgets don't win wars. Soldiers do, and soldiers need weapons they can understand and repair in the field." "Wars?" Crix laughed. "Young species always think in terms of war. True military science is about demonstration of superiority, not crude violence. When the Federation needs to resolve conflicts, we simply show overwhelming technological advantage. The inferior side surrenders immediately." "And if they don't surrender?" Turner asked. "They always do. No rational being would fight against obviously superior force." Turner didn't argue, but he made mental notes about Federation military doctrine. Their strategies seemed to assume that all enemies would think and act like Federation members. It was a dangerous assumption. The meeting that would set everything in motion came when the Federation Council discussed the pirate problem plaguing human colonies. The raids had been increasing, with entire settlements disappearing overnight. Earth was requesting assistance from their new galactic neighbors. "The solution is simple," announced Councilor Drektor of the Zephyrian Republic. "Abandon the Outer Rim colonies and relocate your people to safer regions. The Federation can provide suitable worlds in more secure sectors." "We don't abandon our people," Jake replied, echoing his earlier conversation with Villeneuve. "Those colonists chose to build their lives on those worlds. They deserve protection." "Deserve?" A concept seemed to puzzle the Council. "Resources must be allocated efficiently. Protecting a few thousand beings in dangerous territory is not logical when they could be relocated safely." Dr. Parker stood up. "On Earth, we believe every human life has value, regardless of where they choose to leave. We don't sacrifice some people for the convenience of others." The Council exchanged glances that suggested they found this attitude both primitive and dangerous. Such thinking could lead to chaos if everyone insisted on individual rights over collective efficiency. "Very well," Zethkar said finally. "The Federation will provide minimal patrol support to your outer colonies. But you must understand that we cannot commit significant resources to protecting beings who chose to live in dangerous regions." As the human delegation prepared to leave Nexus Prime, they were approached by a group of younger Federation officers who had been quietly observing the negotiations. Lieutenant Kexra of the Altarian Collective spoke for the group. "Your species thinks differently than ours," she said. "When you spoke of not abandoning your people, it reminded us of stories from our own history, from before we joined the Federation. Sometimes we wonder if we have forgotten important things in our quest for civilization." Turner looked at the young alien officer with interest. "What kind of things?" "Passion, loyalty, the willingness to fight for what we believe in, even when it's not logical." Kexra's voice carried a note of sadness. "The Federation has given us peace, but sometimes peace can make you weak." When the New Horizon finally returned to Earth, Jake carried with him a new understanding of humanity's place in the galaxy. They were surrounded by species that saw them as primitive children, yet those same species had forgotten how to fight for anything beyond their own comfort. The first test came sooner than expected. The pirate warlord Gokter, emboldened by Federation inaction, launched a massive raid against the human colony of New Denver. His fleet of stolen ships descended on the settlement like vultures, expecting easy prey. The Federation's response was predictable. A single patrol ship was dispatched 3 days later to investigate the incident. By the time it arrived, there was nothing left to investigate. Commander Turner had anticipated this outcome. While the diplomats talked with the Federation Council, he had been developing new defensive strategies for the outer colonies. When Goktur's fleet appeared over New Denver, they found the colonists ready to fight. The battle was unlike anything the pirates had experienced. Instead of the usual helpless civilians, they faced coordinated resistance from modified civilian vessels, improvised weapons, and tactics that seemed to come from nowhere. The colonists fought with a desperation and creativity that caught the raiders completely off guard. Turner himself led the counterattack in a converted mining ship, using guerrilla tactics that turned the pirates' own advantages against them. The raiders found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to follow the rules of civilized warfare. When the Federation patrol ship finally arrived, they found the pirate fleet destroyed and Goktur himself in custody. The human colonists had not only survived, but had captured the most feared pirate leader in the sector. The incident report, filed by the Federation patrol commander, was filled with confusion and disbelief. The humans employed tactics that violate all accepted principles of civilized conflict resolution. They deliberately targeted non-military systems and us. The Zephyrian conflict began as a simple border dispute between two Federation member species over mining rights in the OS Kepler 442 system. The Zephyrians claimed the system based on ancient territorial agreements, while the Altarians argued that their more advanced mining technology gave them priority access. For most Federation species, such conflicts were resolved through lengthy negotiations and careful compromise, but the Zephyrians were proud and stubborn. They had been Federation members for over 2,000 years and considered themselves superior to the newer Altarian collective. When negotiations failed, they declared their intention to take the system by force if necessary. The Altarians responded by mobilizing their own fleet. Within weeks, two massive armadas faced each other across the contested system, each waiting for the other to make the first move. A Federation council watched nervously as the situation escalated beyond their usual diplomatic solutions. Karen Wells of the Earth Space Navy was assigned as a military observer, a minor role that reflected humanity's junior status in the Federation. She arrived at the conflict zone aboard her flagship, the Earth vessel Defiant, expecting to witness a typical Federation military engagement. What she found instead was a stalemate that had already lasted 3 months. Both fleets maintained perfect formations, each side waiting for the other to either attack or withdraw. The Zephyrians had superior numbers, but the Altarians possessed more advanced weapons technology. Neither side wanted to risk the massive casualties that a direct confrontation would bring. "This is not warfare," Wells told her staff after observing the standoff for a week. "This is an elaborate chess game where neither player wants to actually move their pieces." The Federation's approach to military conflict was based on 3,000 years of civilized warfare. Battles were fought according to strict rules that minimized casualties and property damage. Both sides would deploy their forces in traditional formations, exchange measured attacks, and eventually, one side would recognize their disadvantage and surrender. It was warfare as a formal dance, predictable and contained. Lieutenant Colonel Steve Mitchell, Wells' tactical advisor, was frustrated by the artificial constraints. "They're not trying to win," he observed. "They're trying to avoid losing face while hoping the other side gives up first." The situation changed when Zephyrian forces finally attacked an Altarian mining station. The assault was conducted according to Federation military doctrine, with advance warning given to civilians and careful targeting to avoid unnecessary destruction. The Altarians responded with an equally measured counterattack against a Zephyrian supply depot. Federation command was pleased with the professional conduct of both sides, But the conflict was entering its 4th month with no resolution in sight. Casualties were minimal, but resources were being wasted on an enormous scale. Both fleets were consuming supplies faster than they could be replaced. Wells requested permission to demonstrate human military doctrine. "Give me 1 month with a single task force," she proposed. "Let me show you how humans would resolve this conflict." The Federation commanders were skeptical, but curious. General Crix of the Thraxian Empire agreed to the demonstration, expecting to prove once and for all that human tactics were primitive and ineffective. "Very well, Admiral Wells. Show us your crude methods." Wells had deliberately brought a mixed force of human and alien volunteers, officers from various Federation species who had expressed interest in human military thinking. She began by discarding every rule of civilized warfare that the Federation held sacred. Her first target was not an enemy ship or military installation, but the Zephyrian supply lines. Captain Rachel Davis led a squadron of fast ships that attacked cargo vessels and fuel tankers throughout the system. The raids were conducted at night, when most Federation species were naturally at their weakest. The Zephyrians were outraged by these attacks on non-military targets. "This is barbaric," protested Admiral Zektar. "Supply ships are not legitimate military targets. They carry food and medical supplies for our crews. They also carry ammunition and fuel," Wells replied coldly. "An army that cannot eat or refuel cannot fight. We are not interested in your rules of civilized warfare." The next shock came when Sergeant Major Tony Rodriguez led boarding parties that captured 3 Zephyrian vessels intact. Instead of destroying enemy ships, the humans seized them and turned their weapons against their former comrades. The psychological impact was devastating. "How can we fight ships that were our own?" asked one captured Zephyrian officer. "Our weapons are not designed to damage vessels of our own construction." Wells explained human military philosophy to her confused alien allies. "We use every advantage available. We adapt to circumstances. We do not limit ourselves to predetermined tactics or honorable conduct when survival is at stake." The final phase of the demonstration involved what Wells called psychological warfare. She studied intercepted communications and identified key cultural tensions within the Zephyrian fleet. Many of their ships were crewed by different subspecies who had historical rivalries. Captain Davis began broadcasting targeted propaganda that exploited these divisions. She spread rumors about favored treatment for certain subspecies, suggested that some crews were being deliberately placed in more dangerous positions, and even fabricated communications between Zephyrian commanders that implied betrayal and conspiracy. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. 3 Zephyrian battalions mutinied against their commanders, convinced that they were being sacrificed for the benefit of rival subspecies. 2 more battalions surrendered to human forces rather than continue fighting alongside crews they no longer trusted. Within 6 weeks, the Zephyrian fleet was in complete disarray. Their supply lines had been severed, their ships were being captured and turned against them, and their crews were fighting each other as much as they were fighting the enemy. Admiral Zektar finally surrendered to Wells personally, begging for terms. "You have destroyed our honor," he told her bitterly. "We came here as proud warriors, and you have made us into frightened children. You came here as players in a game." Wells replied, "We came here to win a war." The Altarians were equally disturbed by human methods. They had expected to benefit from human assistance, but instead found themselves questioning everything they thought they knew about warfare. "You fight like demons," observed Commander Velkas. "There is no honor in your methods." "Honor is a luxury for those who can afford to lose," Wells said. "We fight to protect our people, not to maintain our reputation." The Federation Council was stunned by the rapid resolution of the conflict. A 2-year stalemate had been broken in less than 2 months, with minimal casualties on the human side. But the cost had been enormous in terms of Federation morale and military doctrine. General Crick studied the after-action reports with growing concern. These humans fight without restraint or honor. They target civilian infrastructure, use captured equipment against its former owners, and deliberately spread discord among enemy ranks. Such tactics are effective but dangerous. Dangerous to whom? Asked Admiral Wells during her debrief. To the enemy, certainly, but that is the point of warfare. The debate that followed would reshape Federation military thinking. Some species argued that human methods were too brutal and should be banned from civilized warfare. Others pointed out that external enemies might not share Federation values of honor and restraint. Lieutenant Kexra of the Altarian Collective, who had served as an observer during the conflict, summed up the dilemma facing the Federation. The humans have shown us something we had forgotten. War is not a game to be played by rules. It is a struggle for survival where the winner takes everything. The young officer's words carried weight because she represented the next generation of Federation military thinking. Younger officers who had grown up with Federation peace were beginning to question whether their civilized approach to warfare was actually a weakness. Dr. Lisa Parker, who had remained on Nexus Prime as Earth's cultural liaison, reported growing unrest among Federation populations. They're starting to ask uncomfortable questions about their own military doctrine. Some are even requesting human military advisors. The Zephyrian conflict had demonstrated human military effectiveness, but it had also revealed the fundamental philosophical differences between human and Federation approaches to warfare. The Federation fought wars as extensions of diplomacy, with rules and restraints designed to preserve civilization. Humans fought wars as matters of life and death, with victory as the only acceptable outcome. As news of the conflict spread throughout the galaxy, other species began to take notice of humanity's military potential. The humans had not just won a battle, they had rewritten the rules of warfare itself. Some species were intrigued by human innovations, while others were terrified by their implications. The Federation Council voted to establish a committee to study human military doctrine and determine whether their methods could be adapted for Federation use. It was a decision that would ultimately transform the nature of galactic civilization. Though none of them realized it at the time, Wells returned to Earth with a new understanding of her species' place in the galaxy. The humans were no longer just another junior member of the Nexus Station incident began as a routine maintenance operation on the Federation's largest space station. Nexus Prime housed over 12 million beings from 47 different species, serving as the administrative and cultural heart of galactic civilization. The station had operated flawlessly for over 8 centuries. Its advanced systems maintained by the most sophisticated artificial intelligence in known space, when the cascade failure began in the lower engineering sections. It seemed like a minor technical problem. The station's AI immediately began standard repair procedures, rerouting power and sealing damaged sections. But the failure spread faster than anticipated, racing through the station's interconnected systems like a virus. Commander Ben Sullivan was conducting routine patrol duties in the outer system when the distress signal reached his fleet. The message was brief but terrifying. Nexus Station was losing life support systems throughout 17 sectors, with over 12,000 beings trapped in areas that would become uninhabitable within hours. The Federation's emergency response was swift but limited by their protocols. The evacuation plan, developed over centuries of careful planning, prioritized the most valuable individuals first. High-ranking officials, important scientists, and representatives of the more advanced species were to be rescued before others. This is logical, explained Emergency Coordinator Velkith as the evacuation began. We must preserve those whose knowledge and experience are most valuable to Federation civilization. Sullivan watched the evacuation process with growing anger. Federation rescue ships were bypassing entire sections full of trapped beings, too. Reach designated priority areas. Meanwhile, thousands of lower-ranking individuals from newer species were being left behind to wait for later rescue flights that might never come. "This is wrong," he told his staff. "We don't abandon people based on their species or job title." Dr. Michelle Roberts, the fleet's chief medical officer, shared his outrage. "They're treating this like a business decision instead of a humanitarian crisis. Those are living beings down there, not inventory to be sorted by value." Sullivan made a decision that would change how the galaxy viewed humanity forever. He ordered his entire fleet to begin immediate rescue operations, ignoring Federation protocols and priority lists. His ships would save whoever they could reach. First, regardless of species or status, the human rescue teams worked with an intensity that amazed their alien allies. Private Jake Thompson volunteered to seal a massive hull breach in Section 47, knowing that the radiation exposure would likely kill him. He saved 17 Thraxian civilians, including children, before succumbing to his injuries. Why did he do that? Asked Sub-Commander Crickstow, one of the Thraxians who had been rescued. "My people have shown nothing but contempt for humans. Why would he sacrifice his life for strangers who despise him?" Sullivan tried to explain, but found that the concept didn't translate well. He did it because it was the right thing to do. Human lives, alien lives, all lives have value. We don't measure worth by species or politics. Dr. Roberts and her medical teams worked for 36 hours without rest, treating injured beings with experimental techniques that Federation medicine had never attempted. She used human surgical procedures adapted for alien physiology, often improvising solutions when standard treatments failed. The most dramatic rescue came when Captain Lisa Martinez led a team into the station's collapsed central core. The area was flooded with toxic gases and unstable debris, but sensors indicated that over 300 beings were trapped in an emergency shelter deep within the wreckage. "The risk is too great," protested Federation Rescue Coordinator Ziegler. "We cannot sacrifice trained rescue personnel for such a small number of survivors." 300 lives is not a small number, Martinez replied as she led her team into the dangerous section. Every person matters. The rescue took 14 hours of careful work through collapsing passages and deadly atmospheric conditions. Martinez's team saved 284 beings from 17 different species, though they lost 2 human rescuers in the process. The survivors included maintenance workers, junior clerks, and other individuals who would never have been prioritized under Federation protocols. As the crisis continued, something remarkable happened. Alien rescue workers began abandoning their assigned priority zones to help human teams save whoever they could reach. The careful hierarchy of Federation emergency procedures broke down as beings from different species worked together to save lives without regard for rank or status. Lieutenant Commander Paul Davis led a mixed team of humans and aliens that saved over 400 beings from the station's collapsed residential sector. The team included Zephyrian warriors, Altarian scientists, and even Thraxian officers who had previously expressed contempt for human methods. "This is chaos," observed Ambassador Zefkar as he watched the rescue operations. "They have abandoned all logical prioritization in favor of emotional responses." But the results spoke for themselves. While Federation rescue teams saved approximately 6,000 beings according to their careful protocols, the combined human-alien rescue effort saved over 8,000 more. The total casualty count was far lower than anyone had expected. Psychological impact of the rescue operations was profound. Beings who had been written off as expendable by Federation protocols found themselves saved by humans who didn't even know their names. The concept of universal human dignity Something that had seemed abstract during diplomatic meetings became real and immediate. Commander Helen Clark, who had been serving as Earth's diplomatic representative, found herself explaining human philosophy to confused alien survivors. We believe that every thinking being has inherent worth that cannot be measured by their usefulness to society. This is not efficiency, it is morality. The concept was revolutionary to species that had organized their entire civilizations around hierarchical structures. The idea that a maintenance worker might be as worthy of rescue as a high-ranking official challenged fundamental assumptions about social organization. The Federation Council convened emergency sessions to discuss the implications of human rescue doctrine. Some members were impressed by the effectiveness of human methods, while others were disturbed by the social chaos that might result from abandoning established hierarchies. If we accept human concepts of individual worth, argued Councillor Drachter, then we must question our entire system of governance. Why should some species have more voting power than others? Why should age and advancement determine political influence? The questions were uncomfortable because they exposed contradictions in Federation ideology. The Federation claimed to value all life, but their actions consistently prioritized some forms of life over others. Humans had forced them to confront this hypocrisy. The situation became more complex when reports began arriving from the Outer Rim. The Veltar Empire, a hostile civilization from beyond Federation space, was conducting probing attacks against isolated systems. Unlike the pirates that humans had faced before, the Veltar were an organized military force with advanced technology and expansionist ambitions. General Patricia Green was assigned to assist Federation forces in developing defensive strategies against the Veltar threat. What she found was a military doctrine that was completely unprepared for fighting an enemy that didn't share Federation values of restraint and honor. "They fight like we used to fight," she reported to Earth Command. "They don't care about civilian casualties or property damage. They're not interested in negotiation or compromise. They want to conquer and rule." The Federation's first encounter with Veltar forces was a disaster. The aliens fought with tactics that were similar to human methods, but without any moral restraints. They targeted civilian populations, used captured prisoners as human shields, and showed no mercy to defeated enemies. "This is barbaric," protested Admiral Velkith after the Battle of Rigel 7. "They ignore all civilized conventions of warfare." "Now you understand what we've been trying to tell you," Green replied. "Not all enemies will fight by your rules. Sometimes you need to be prepared to fight like humans." The training programs that Green developed for Federation forces were revolutionary. Instead of teaching aliens to follow predetermined battle plans, she taught them to think creatively and adapt to changing circumstances. The results were dramatic, but disturbing. Federation officers who had been trained by humans began questioning orders that seemed illogical. They showed initiative in combat situations that their cultures had never encouraged. Some species found this liberation exciting, while others worried that their traditional values were being corrupted. Captain Mike Foster led the first joint human-alien task force against a Veltar raiding party. The operation was a complete success, but the methods used shocked Federation observers. The task force used deception, ambush tactics, and psychological warfare to defeat an enemy that outnumbered them 3-1. "They fight like demons," observed one captured Veltar officer. "They show no honor, no mercy, no restraint. How can civilized beings behave in such a manner?" The question haunted Federation leadership because it forced them to confront an uncomfortable truth. The galaxy was not a civilized place filled with honorable enemies. It was a dangerous frontier where survival of the Eltar Empire's invasion began with a coordinated strike that demonstrated the true meaning of total warfare. 17 Federation worlds were attacked simultaneously. their orbital defenses overwhelmed by massive dreadnought fleets that dwarfed anything the galaxy had seen before. Each Veltar battleship was larger than most Federation space stations, bristling with weapons that could crack planetary crusts. Admiral John Parker received the emergency transmission while reviewing defensive preparations at the Federation's main military base. The message was brief but devastating. The outer rim systems of Kepler 438, Gliese 667, and Tau Ceti had gone silent within hours of each other. Long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures consistent with planetary bombardment. "They're not just invading," reported Colonel Lisa Martinez as the scope of the attack became clear. "They're systematically destroying everything that could support resistance. Military bases, industrial centers, even civilian infrastructure that might be useful to defenders." The Veltar strategy was designed to break enemy morale through overwhelming demonstration of power. They had conquered dozens of civilizations using the same approach: strike hard, strike fast, and leave survivors traumatized by the scale of destruction. Most species surrendered after witnessing the fate of the first few worlds, Parker found, himself commanding a unified galactic defense force that existed only on paper. The Federation had no experience with coordinated multi-species military operations, and their command structure was designed for peaceful administration rather than wartime leadership. Different species used incompatible communication systems, weapons, and tactical doctrines. "We have numerical superiority," reported General Patricia Green during the first strategy meeting, "but our forces are scattered across hundreds of systems, and most commanders have never fought a real battle. The Veltar fleet is smaller, but concentrated and experienced." The Federation's traditional response to military threats was to establish defensive perimeters and wait for the enemy to exhaust themselves against prepared positions. This approach had worked against pirates and other minor threats, but the Veltar were not interested in lengthy sieges or negotiated settlements. "They're moving too fast for conventional defense," observed Commander Helen Clark as Veltar forces bypassed heavily defended systems to strike at unprotected targets. "By the time we can respond to one attack, they've already launched 3 more." Parker realized that Federation military doctrine was fundamentally flawed for this type of conflict. The aliens thought in terms of protecting territory and preserving resources, but the Veltar were focused on breaking the enemy's will to fight. Standard defensive strategies would only delay the inevitable. "We need to implement the human protocol," he announced during an emergency council session. Every aspect of human military doctrine deployed simultaneously across all theaters of operation. The decision horrified many Federation leaders. The human protocol represented everything that civilized warfare was supposed to avoid: total commitment, unlimited tactics, and victory at any cost. But with 17 worlds already burning, they had few alternatives. Colonel Martinez was given command of the first deep infiltration mission behind enemy lines. Her teams used modified civilian ships to penetrate Veltar territory and establish hidden bases that could strike at supply convoys and communication networks. The concept of fighting behind enemy lines was alien to Federation thinking, but it proved devastatingly effective. "They don't guard their rear areas," Martinez reported. After her first successful raid, they assumed that anyone capable of reaching their supply lines would have been destroyed in the initial assault. "They're not prepared for enemies who refuse to fight conventional battles." Major Kevin Brown pioneered the use of automated weapons, systems that Federation species had considered too dangerous for civilized warfare. His kamikaze drones were unmanned ships packed with explosives that could overwhelm Veltar shields through sheer numbers. The psychological impact was enormous. "Their machines," one captured Veltar officer explained, "they don't fear death because they are not alive." How can warriors fight against weapons that feel no pain and show no mercy? The concept of sacrificing equipment to achieve tactical advantage was revolutionary to both Federation and Veltar thinking. Most species viewed military hardware as valuable resources to be preserved, but humans treated weapons as expendable tools designed to accomplish specific missions. Captain Mike Foster led the most audacious operation of the war when he infiltrated a Veltar command ship during the Battle of Vega Prime. His team used stolen uniforms and forged identification to access the enemy vessel's communication center, where they broadcast false orders that convinced half the Veltar fleet that their own commanders had been compromised. "The enemy fleet is turning on itself," reported Federation observers with amazement. "They're firing on their own ships based on information warfare conducted by a single human squad." The psychological warfare campaign expanded rapidly as human teams learned to exploit Veltar cultural weaknesses. The invaders were organized around strict hierarchical structures that made them vulnerable to misinformation about command authority. False communications suggesting betrayal or incompetence caused chaos throughout their ranks. Dr. Michelle Roberts developed biological weapons specifically designed to target Veltar physiology. The weapons were non-lethal but caused severe disorientation and nausea that made it impossible for enemy soldiers to fight effectively. The Federation had never used biological warfare before, considering it too barbaric for civilized conflict. "This is not warfare," protested Ambassador Zethkar. "This is systematic destruction of everything that makes war honorable." "Honor is a luxury we cannot afford," Parker replied. "The Veltar are not fighting an honorable war. They're trying to exterminate us." The turning point came during the Battle of Kepler 452b, where Commander Sarah Johnson implemented total war strategy on a galactic scale. Instead of focusing purely on military targets, she coordinated attacks against Veltar infrastructure, communication networks, and cultural sites that held symbolic importance to their civilization. "We're not just destroying their ability to fight," she explained to her staff. "We're destroying their identity as a people. They've never faced an enemy willing to target everything they value." The strategy worked because it attacked the Veltar at their most vulnerable point, their sense of cultural superiority. They had conquered other civilizations by demonstrating overwhelming military power, but they had never faced enemies who would attack the very foundations of their society. Federation forces that had been trained by humans began showing remarkable effectiveness in combat. Alien officers who had learned to think like humans displayed creativity and initiative that their cultures had never encouraged. The transformation was so dramatic that some species worried about losing their traditional identities. "They're becoming more human than alien," observed Dr. Lisa Parker during a visit to the front lines. "The training programs are changing their fundamental thought processes." The war's climax came when the Veltar leadership, facing the complete breakdown of their military organization and the systematic destruction of their cultural infrastructure, made an unprecedented decision. They offered to negotiate a peace settlement, something they had never done in their entire history of conquest. "We cannot fight an enemy that refuses to follow the rules of warfare," admitted Veltar Supreme Commander Gakthul during the surrender negotiations. "You attack everything we value, corrupt our own forces against us, and show no mercy to our traditions. This is not conquest, it is annihilation." The terms of surrender were harsh but necessary. The Veltar Empire would withdraw from all conquered territories, dismantle their military infrastructure, and accept Federation oversight of their future activities. More importantly, they would abandon their expansionist ideology and adopt Federation principles of peaceful coexistence. But the victory came at a cost that many Federation species found disturbing. The war had been won using human methods of total warfare that violated every principle of civilized conflict. The galaxy was safe, but the Federation had fundamentally changed in the process. "We have become what we fought against," argued several Federation Council members. "We used barbaric methods to defeat barbarians. How does this make us better than the Veltar?" Parker addressed these concerns during his final report to the Federation Council. "The Veltar gave us no choice. They were not interested in negotiation or compromise. They wanted to destroy us completely. We responded with the only methods that could ensure our survival." The aftermath of the war revealed the true scope of the transformation. Federation species that had been trained by humans continued to think and act differently even after the fighting ended. They questioned authority, showed individual initiative, and demanded explanations for decisions that affected their lives. "Human influence has spread beyond military matters," reported Dr. Parker. "They're applying human concepts of individual rights and democratic governance to their own societies. Some species are embracing these changes, while others are struggling to maintain their traditional cultures." The war had demonstrated that human military doctrine was not just a code. The transformation of galactic civilization became complete when the Federation Council voted to restructure their entire military organization around human principles. Admiral Nancy Davis, the first non-Federation species to serve as Supreme Military Commander, stood before representatives from over 200 worlds as she accepted the position that would make humanity the ultimate arbiter of galactic military power. "We face a new era," Davis announced to the assembled delegates. The old Federation was built on the assumption that peace could be maintained through diplomacy and mutual restraint. Recent events have shown us that such assumptions can be deadly when facing enemies who do not share our values. The restructuring was swift and comprehensive. Human military academies were established on every major Federation world, with alien officers learning to think tactically rather than follow predetermined protocols. General Chris Murphy developed the Adaptive Response Doctrine, which emphasized flexibility, initiative, and creative problem-solving over traditional rigid command structures. The changes went far beyond military matters. Species that had lived under hierarchical systems for millennia began experiencing internal upheaval as their populations adopted human concepts of individual rights and democratic governance. The Thraxian Empire faced civil unrest when their warrior caste began questioning the traditional authority of hereditary leaders. "Why should birth determine leadership?" demanded Sub-Commander Krikstal during a public assembly on Thraxis Prime. Human military doctrine teaches that competence and courage matter more than bloodline. If this is true in warfare, why not in governance? The Thraxian Council had no answer for such questions. Their entire civilization was built on the principle that some beings were naturally superior to others. But human influence had introduced the revolutionary idea that individual worth was determined by actions rather than genetics. Ambassador Daniel Clark worked tirelessly to help Federation species adapt to these changes, but the process was chaotic and often painful. Some civilizations embraced human-style democracy and individual freedom, while others retreated into isolation rather than face the social upheaval that such changes would bring. "We are witnessing the birth of a new galactic order," Clark reported to Earth Command. But birth is rarely a gentle process. Some species are thriving under human influence, while others are being torn apart by internal conflicts. The most dramatic transformation occurred on Alterian Prime, where the collective's traditional group consciousness began fragmenting as individuals learned to think independently. Dr. Michelle Roberts, now serving as a cultural advisor, watched with fascination as an entire species redefined their concept of self. "They're becoming individuals for the first time in their history," she observed. "The process is traumatic, but ultimately liberating. They're discovering that they can disagree, with each other without losing their essential identity. The changes were not universally welcomed. The hegemony, a coalition of species from the galactic core, viewed human influence as a corrupting force that threatened everything they valued about traditional civilization. These species had achieved stability through careful social engineering and were horrified by the chaos that human ideas brought to their ordered societies. "The humans are destroyers," declared Hegemony Supreme Chancellor Vexenor during a secret meeting of core world leaders. "They spread discord and rebellion wherever they go. Their concepts of individual rights and democratic governance are viruses that will destroy galactic civilization if left unchecked." The Hegemony's declaration of war came as a shock to the Federation Council. Unlike the Veltar, who had been external invaders, the Hegemony represented internal resistance to human-inspired change. They possessed Federation technology and understood human psychology, making them far more dangerous than any previous enemy. General Amy Rodriguez found herself facing a different kind of conflict than any human had fought before. The Hegemony forces were well-trained, well-equipped, and intimately familiar with human military doctrine. They had studied human tactics and developed specific countermeasures designed to neutralize human advantages. "They know how we think," Rodriguez reported during the first major engagement. "They're using our own psychological warfare techniques against us, broadcasting propaganda that portrays us as destructive barbarians whose influence will ultimately destroy galactic civilization." The Hegemony's strategy was sophisticated and effective. They targeted Federation worlds where human influence had created the most social disruption, offering stability and traditional values to populations exhausted by constant change. Many systems welcomed Hegemony forces as liberators rather than conquerors. "We offer a return to the old ways," Hegemony commanders announced to captured territories. "No more chaos, no more questioning of authority, no more uncertainty about your place in the natural order. We will restore the peace and stability that existed before human contamination." The message resonated with species that had found human ideas challenging and disruptive. The Zephyrian Republic, still struggling with internal conflicts caused by human concepts of equality, formally joined the Hegemony after their government collapsed under the pressure of democratic reform. Captain Peter Williams led the Federation's initial response to the Hegemony threat, but his forces were hampered by the same social disruption that had made the enemy's propaganda effective. Many Federation worlds were too busy dealing with internal upheaval to contribute meaningfully to the war effort. "We're fighting a war on multiple fronts," Williams reported. "The Hegemony is attacking our military forces, while their propaganda undermines our political stability. Some of our own allies are beginning to question whether human influence is worth the cost." The war's early phases went badly for the Federation. Hegemony forces, fighting to preserve their traditional way of life, displayed a unity and determination that the socially disrupted Federation worlds could not match. They won several major battles by exploiting the confusion and divided loyalties that human ideas had created among Federation populations. The turning point came when Admiral Davis realized that the Federation's greatest weakness could also become its greatest strength. The social chaos that human influence had created was indeed disruptive, but it had also produced something unprecedented in galactic history. A generation of beings who thought for themselves. "We're not fighting to preserve the old Federation," Davis announced during a galaxy-wide broadcast. "We're fighting to create something entirely new. A civilization where every thinking being has the right to determine their own destiny, regardless of species or tradition." The message transformed the nature of the conflict. Instead of defending an existing order, the Federation began fighting for a revolutionary ideal that had never existed before in galactic history. Young beings from dozens of species rallied to this cause, Viewing the war as a struggle between freedom and oppression, Captain Lisa Martinez led the first truly integrated military unit in galactic history, with humans and aliens fighting side by side as equals rather than following traditional species hierarchies. The unit's effectiveness was remarkable, combining human tactical innovation with alien technological capabilities and cultural insights. "They fight like demons," reported a captured hegemony officer after his forces were routed by Martinez's mixed unit. "They show no respect for proper military order or species distinctions. How can we defeat an enemy that refuses to follow any recognizable pattern?" The final phase of the war demonstrated the true extent of human influence on galactic civilization. Federation forces no longer fought like the careful, restrained military organizations of the past. They fought with human intensity and creativity, but enhanced by the diverse capabilities of dozens of different species. Major Kevin Brown coordinated a massive deception operation that convinced the hegemony leadership that their own core worlds were under attack. The psychological warfare campaign was so effective that hegemony forces abandoned their offensive operations to defend territories that were never actually threatened. The decisive battle occurred when Commander Sarah Johnson led a direct assault on the hegemony capital. Her forces included humans, former Thraxian warriors who had embraced democratic ideals, Altarians who had learned to think as individuals, and representatives from dozens of other species who had been transformed by human influence. "This is not conquest," Johnson announced as hegemony defenses collapsed. "This is liberation. We offer you the same choice we have offered every species in the galaxy. Join us as equals, or continue to live in the shadows of your own fear." The hegemony's surrender marked the end of organized resistance to human influence in the galaxy. Their defeat was swift and decisive, accomplished by forces that had been trained in human military doctrine and inspired by human ideals of individual freedom and democratic governance. The war's aftermath revealed the complete transformation of galactic civilization. The Federation now encompassed over 200 species, all trained in human military doctrine and committed to human principles of individual rights and democratic governance. They explored the galaxy not as conquerors, but as liberators, spreading these concepts to every world they encountered. "We have created something that has never existed.